Everybody, welcome to Hit Rewind. This episode, we're continuing our 1990 movies. We're doing the horror and thriller section. So we're going to be discussing Jacob's Ladder and Child's Play 2. I know those two don't really seem to go together. It's weird, but the thing is, you know what really goes well with Jacob's Ladder? Is a movie I don't own. It's called Flatliners. Have you ever seen Flatliners?
I have not, but I'm familiar with the premise. That's people are basically intentionally killing themselves and bringing themselves back to life so they can see the other side.
Yeah, and they're bringing back, like, the phantasms from that world or whatever because they played with death. It's a really good movie. It's very atmospheric. I just don't have it, so sorry.
Did you see the remake of that one?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I didn't hate it like everybody did.
Oh, okay, interesting. I've only heard negative things.
Yeah, I know. It was a huge flop. It just something about it. And speaking of remakes, while watching Jacob's Ladder, I just finished it like 5 minutes ago or whatever. They remade that 3 years ago, and I didn't even know it. It was like sold straight to DirecTV. I was like, "What the?" And it got terrible reviews.
Ooh, that's too bad.
Yeah. This was the first time watch for me on Jacob's Ladder. Was it for you?
No, I've seen it a couple times.
This movie is fucking wild. And
yeah. What was funny about when we were first talking about doing this one, I was like, oh, I could do this like tomorrow because I've seen it a couple times. I just need like a quick brush through, just like at the broad strokes to remember. But as I started doing that, I was so confused as to what was happening that I just had to watch the whole movie again.
Yeah, so here's what I was just realizing. 1990, because we talked about it with 1989, is the death of all the major franchises. They're all bombing left and right, and the new ones aren't
taking... They're all going to space, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, we had Jason Takes Manhattan, and that stunk up the joint. Freddy, what is it, the Dream Child, which is actually decent, didn't do very well. And then the Halloween 5 sucks royal dick, because they killed Rachel. Fuck you! And then Shocker didn't take off. The Phantom of the Opera with Robert Englund didn't take off. It was a really bad year for horror. All those underwater monster movies all tanked. And
unintended.
Oh yeah, good one. So 1990 seems to be like the last gasp of that kind of horror movie, And then 1990 seems like they're trying to push in another direction, a more mature, sophisticated. I mean, you could even count Ghost as almost horror-oriented. Have you ever seen Ghost?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, there are a couple of scenes that are terrifying.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure the writer of Ghost is the writer of Jacob's Ladder.
Oh, interesting.
I have to look that up before I'm completely and utterly full of shit.
Yeah.
Bruce Joel Rubin is the writer of that one, and he did like 3 movies that really deal with death, so I wonder if he's working some shit out. Yeah, same writer.
Interesting.
He did My Life like 3 years later, where it's Michael Keaton dealing with cancer and stuff like that. So, but you're seeing more sophistication because we also just discussed Misery, and I think Jacob's Ladder is almost a giant fucking leap forward. It almost feels like a horror movie now because I feel like they're more challenging and complicated than they were 30 years ago.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what is, like, so when you're saying that, like, we're kind of, I think it's funny that we're kind of doing a more, like, sophisticated type horror movie, and then we're immediately going to go Child's Play 2.
Yes, yeah.
Shit. And, like, what is interesting is, like, those, like, sequel-heavy sort of movies are sort of dying out. And, yeah, we're going into, as you said a while ago when we started doing this, is that, like, we're getting the Blank from Hell type movies, which are more about, like, the human experience or human interaction, like that kind of horror thing, instead of extraterrestrials or monsters and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Serial killers, stuff like that. Those are fading away. And I think it's funny is, like I said, that whole genre was launched with Fatal Attraction, directed by Adrian Lyne, who was also the director of Jacob's Ladder, and this was his big pet project that nobody wanted to do. They were like, it's too fucking strange, it's too complicated, audiences aren't going to get it. But there was a company called Caracol, and mostly were known for doing big action movies. They had done the Rambos and Red Heat and Total Recall and stuff like that. But they were also known for cashing out, like, huge paychecks to, directors and actors that they wanted to bring under their shelter to give them some prestige. So you can see why they put, I still can't understand how this is $25 million, though. That doesn't sound right to me.
Yeah, because it is pretty understated. I mean, there's like one kind of creature-y thing, but there's not. Like, I guess maybe in the settings or maybe where they had to shoot. I don't know, but yeah, it's kind of complex.
That sounds like the kind of thing, honestly, to me, knowing how a lot of these companies run. Feels like someone might have embezzled some of that because I'm pretty sure it's shot in Canada. The biggest name is Tim Robbins, who really only had one minor hit before this, and that's Bull Durham. And he's the biggest name? What? So I'm going to guess actually probably about 12, 15 at most. But that's actually irrelevant. What is actually amazing about this is that it's all about atmosphere, emotion. Is this the saddest, darkest movie that we have ever discussed?
Probably. I'd have to go back through our stuff, but it's definitely not one of those where you defeat the monster kind of thing. It's not one of those.
Yeah, it's all about like these broken souls and trying to figure out where they're going with it. But here's the thing, and I'm going to spoil the fuck out of this. What happened? Did any of it happen? Or we're still in Vietnam, right? It never went beyond Vietnam, and he was hallucinating the whole time?
Are you saying are you saying that he never died in Vietnam?
No, he died in Vietnam, and everything you saw that took place after that was all a hallucination?
Yes, that's my take on it.
Holy fuck. That's one elaborate mind, by the way. So while he's dying after being gutted on the field by what? By apparently his own people because it was part of an experiment?
Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. Is that, like, we learn about the experiment in his dying vision, so was that even real? Because, like, what I think is really good about this is just so much of it's just a mind fuck. But if you notice in the beginning that one of the people in his troop was kind of freaking out a little bit, and I'm wondering if there wasn't any gas or anything, if the guy just freaked out and just stabbed him, and then that created this whole movie. Is just that one troop going insane.
That's fucking wild, because we spend an hour in this world where he's investigating what happened, and he's meeting up with all his old, what do you call that? Platoon.
Army buddies.
Platoon. And they're trying to figure out, like, oh, how are these people getting blown up, this mysterious stuff? Is he in purgatory? I kept trying to figure out, and then he was, like, having these breaks where he would go to another reality where he's married and Macaulay Culkin's his kid. Then all of a sudden he spends so much time with Macaulay Culkin as his only kid, and all of a sudden he has two more kids that no one ever brought up before, and then he sucks back into another reality where he just spent talking about, oh, I just woke up from this nightmare.
And there's a flashback where Macaulay Culkin is hit by a car and died. So what is real?
I don't know. So you imagine his married life and the kids? This is fucking crazy ass wild movie, and I commend it. I mean, this is the closest I think I will ever get to like a David Lynch kind of movie and not getting angry and turning it off.
Yeah. Well, I think with David Lynch, his movies, so I found a trick to liking David Lynch movies. You have to not think about it. You have to just emotionally invest as much as you can in his stories without thinking about any logic. Just try to empathize or feel whatever the characters are feeling, and you can get sucked into those movies. But with this one, there is more of a logic happening that you can follow. There is a storyline, but it just gets incredibly muddled, and at some point it doesn't really matter because obviously we spoiled it, but he died in Vietnam. None of this that he dreams about or that he's thinking about when he died is real. And there's a lot of things that are very interesting that point out that he's dead. And there's also this really dark moment at the end when they just stop performing surgery and realize, all right, he's dead. And then they just walk away. And you can hear the music happening in the background is the music he was singing to his son. And, it's just brutal.
Yeah. You know what it made me think of? This is like the polar opposite of the emotional tone. But do you remember Raising Arizona, where he talks about his vision?
I don't. Isn't that when he just has like no, I can't remember the vision.
Nicolas Cage at the end of the movie is talking about how he had this vision of his life in the future, and so he sees that him and his wife have a kid, and then they have kids, and they get very, very old, and they're holding hands when they're like in their 90s, whatever, and they're getting visited by their grandkids or whatever, and life works out or whatever. So it's like a very, very fucked up version of Raising Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, what the movie really is about is accepting and moving on.
Yeah,
and that is a really messed up thing to think about. Like, just trying forever to hold on to something that you can't hold on to, whether it's his marriage, whether it's his child who died tragically by getting hit by a car, whether it's to his own health. Like, none of it really, you can't keep it all. Like, everything eventually, everything that is born will die, and you have to accept that.
Yeah,
it's very brutal.
So are the demons that are coming for him, was that like a metaphor for they're trying to take him to death and he's trying to stay alive? Is that what it is?
Well, again, this movie is so open to interpretation that we can talk forever about like what we think it is. But for me, I think the demons more represent the consequences of holding on. So for him, that would be like he's dead and he has to let go. So the demons are there to torment him, so he'll let go, just like his chiropractor was telling him about the difference of like angels and demons.
Was his chiropractor like the voice in his head telling him to do whatever, like let go?
Yeah, it seems like that was more like the angels versus the demons kind of thing. But
okay.
I think also it's just it can also just be more about the consequences of obsession of trying to hold on. The demons are like him doggedly trying to pursue something that he can't take down. Trying to take down the U.S. government alone is impossible, and he's just banging his head out against the wall. And that obsession is kind of what leads him to be put into a mental asylum where the guy has the no eyes.
But he doesn't actually go to an asylum.
I know, but again, it's all interpretation because none of it matters.
I love this movie. I'm so impressed by the audacity to try to pull this off.
Yeah, no, I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't care for it because I was like one of those people at the time of like, oh, what was the point, man? Because like none of it matters, and it's like, well, yes, none of it matters, but there's a lot to unpack about that.
Yeah,
like I've since grown to like to love like bottle episodes of TV shows that are more like in-depth dives into characters and these types of movies that really are just more about an idea rather than like a plot. So
yeah, and I think
if you're into that kind of thing, Jacob's Ladder is the shit.
I'm pretty sure it was deliberate, but by using a like a soft focus or a fog filter to give it like almost a dream feel,
yes,
that was it had to have been deliberate. He's not a fucking amateur filmmaker. He had to have known.
Because you have to try to do that, especially practically. So like there's intentionality in that.
Yeah, and this none of this sounds like a horror movie, but I don't want to say the words elevated horror. I fucking hate that. But it's more a psychological thriller. But there's some moments in it that are truly fucking disturbing, and I see it. Like I feel like 10 years later is when they were really using these kind of camera trickeries, like the speed up herky jerkies and the weird shock horror, where it's not things jumping out at you, it's seeing something that you're not sure what the fuck or why the fuck you're seeing it. Like that old lady when her hat falls off and she has like horns coming out of her head.
Oh yeah, that was one of the most disturbing parts to me.
Yeah, and stuff like that, like you really see it. Do you remember like in House on Haunted Hill, the remake? I think that's the first time where they really use that sped up herky jerky or whatever, and I thought that's where it started, and I feel like all the horror movies use that, even up to today. But no, I'm sure it started with Jacob's Ladder.
House on Haunted Hill, the remake, is that the one where one of the Wilsons gets his head bit off by a giant pendulum?
No, that is The Haunting, which came out just a couple months prior, which I picked up today, kids.
Okay. Anyway, so this is an excellent movie and very highly recommend if you're into that kind of thing. And what's another thing that's really interesting about that is that I'm really into this what's called analog horror. Have you heard of that?
No, I have no idea what that is. Is it all movies before there was ever any sort of digital like cell phones and stuff like that?
Yeah, so like it's very popular online, but a lot of it basically has to do with being presented with something, with information that you should not have, and that sort of eerie feeling of being trapped and alone. And I think that this movie really helped start that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's the first time I've ever heard of that.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, I can send you some stuff if you're interested.
Yeah, totally. I thought maybe you meant movies that were set in the 70s, before digital became a thing. So I was wrong.
I mean, that is part of it. Like analog horror is like found footage, like tapes, audio logs, things like that aren't digital. But they use a lot of the same tropes, and one of those tropes is, like I said, like the being given too much information.
All right, so you're going to break your neck with a tone switch on this one. Child's Play 2. Now, here's the craziest thing, and I think we discussed this on the Child's Play episode, is that MGM, dire for a hit. They were just a broken company. And then the guy who ran MGM was like pretty religious, and he's like, no more horror movies, and sold off the rights to Child's Play. That's why Universal reaped the benefits of all those sequels and the TV show. I think the second one is still pretty good. I think there's a mistake that we'll hit with the third one where I think they rushed it too quickly. They didn't take time between.
Oh, yeah. The third one is military school, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah, that was bad.
In the sequel, it still feels it's in line just enough. But what I don't like is when they kill off one of the characters, especially when they're so important to the franchise, just to move in a different direction. Maybe she didn't want to do the sequel. I'll give fair shake to that. But if they didn't want to pay her, that's shit.
I mean, I still enjoyed it. I still had a good time. I think that they did a little too much with doing catchphrases and things like that. Like, he's not Freddy Krueger. He doesn't really need those, but like it's still fine, and the special effects are still really good. In fact, like the end inside like the doll factory, like that scene's still fucked up. Like I saw that as a kid, and that blew my mind. And watching it as an adult, I'm like, wow, that's still pretty gross.
Yeah. Oh, I think it's crazy, and I think we discussed this already. I apologize if I'm repeating myself, but the fact that they would like grind him up and melt him and blow him up, all these things they do to him, and they're like, let's just take him back to the factory and rebuild him. No, you fucking throw the thing away and you just put out a new one. What? Why?
Yeah, that would also. I didn't quite get that the opening thing, but I understand that they have to make a reason why. It's still his, like he's still in the doll or whatever, and they kind of just gave up on that. For the other sequels, it just kind of exists forever in this doll for no reason. But like the idea is that the company, I guess, was going to be sued or were already sued, and they're trying to cover their ass. They're like, no, look, this is the original doll. We're just going to put all of the components into a new one to show you that there's nothing to be afraid of, that they're all lying. So like I get that, but like it's still just, it feels a little lazy. Hello?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah. So that's my rant about that.
Well, I was just thinking, like, he's already basically unkillable in the first one. The pieces just kept going. Why don't you just, like, we just put this all in a bag or whatever as evidence, and he has some sort of healing thing, whatever. And they did that with Dracula, and it worked just fucking fine. Oh, if his head's too close to his body, it'll knit itself back. Just do that with Chucky. Come on.
Yeah, because it already kind of walks the line of, like, well, I guess the original, the first one was, it was a voodoo thing.
Right.
Like, he was putting his soul in the doll. So is his soul a part of the components of the doll? You know what I'm saying? Like, in the sequels, it was like, or like the Bride of Chucky or whatever, she did some kind of magic ritual to put his soul in another doll. So, like, it's still, like, soul voodoo-based. But this is, like, technology-based. So it doesn't quite work.
Yeah, it threw me off. But you know what I gotta say? To this day, I am still fucking haunted by that opening kill. When he has the guy in the car and he has him tie his hands behind his back. and then he puts a bag over his head and just suffocates him. That's some low-key fucking horrifying shit. And I keep thinking about it to this day. I was like, okay, so if that happens to me, do I like try to bite the bag and tear, like eat the pieces and then like, you know, whatever, get some oxygen? I don't know what I would do, but it scares the shit out of me.
Yeah. But that's one of those things too. Like, if you do successfully chew that bag to the point where you can breathe, they'll just kill you another way. Like, your hands are tied. You're still dead.
Yeah. Or Chucky would just get bored and like, fuck that shit.
No, he doesn't let people go.
No. You know, there's a death in this that everybody thought was comical, and I think they forget how rulers used to be made. Yardsticks, and they may still be made this way, I'm not sure, but yardsticks back in the day had a metal edge to it.
Yes, I still have one of those.
Okay. Yeah, and I think if you're like, how could you get killed by something like that? It's like, yeah, those things were pretty sturdy, and it has a metal blade basically on it, and it's a fucking movie, guys. It's just a movie.
Yeah.
Shut up.
I get it, especially like nowadays, they don't make them like that. But yeah, if you look back at the time, it worked. It made sense.
Yeah, and the deaths in this are pretty like, oh, okay, that seems like something that, you know, they're not going over the...
We're talking about a doll that moves around and
yes!
full-grown men, so let's not argue about the rules.
Oh, man, and the special effects were pretty good in the first one, but they're unbelievably good in this one. The technology leaps that Kevin Yeager has done, and yes, there's still a dude in a suit for a little bit of it, but there's way more animatronics going on.
This is the one where he's walking with the axe, right?
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's terrifying.
It's so good.
And the gross out gore effect of him sticking the knife into his severed hand. I remembered that from when I was a kid. That's never left me how terrifying that is.
Yeah, and I remember I had... in fact, if you look on Wikipedia, you'll see the poster. I used to have a magnet on the inside of my locker in high school that said, "Sorry, Jack, Chucky's back, Child's Play 2."
Yeah, the Child's Play 2 VHS tape is in Jerry Seinfeld's apartment in Seinfeld.
That's so weird, right? He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would want to see that, so I'm just guessing they were like, we need something to put here. What do we got?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what? Let's not watch part 3. Let's save ourselves, because it sucks dick.
I just watched part 3, and it's not worth talking about.
No, and of course this time, they don't put him back together. They just melt his body and they put him back together in another doll. But then it's years later, so I don't know if they were tired of working with a kid, and then they shot forward, like 7 years? Yeah, and I just, like that already, I was like, wait, what? This journey that we had is gone. I mean, yes, that's technically the same character, but you know that bullshit where it's like, oh, they just replaced, with another actor. And I just don't think the setting works. I don't think the gags are any good. I think the one-liners suck. And there's a reason why it just faded away. They just rushed it so fast. It came out, what, 9 months later? Maybe even less.
Jesus.
Yeah,
wow,
it was November 10th, I think, of 1990 is part 2. And then it was Labor Day weekend, so like August 31st of 1991. That's how fast they turned that movie around.
I mean, to be fair, X and Pearl both came out this year, but it's like the same actors and the same location, so you can just kind of shoot those back to back and not really lose quality, and there's not really a lot of crazy special effects or anything. So
right.
It makes sense that you could make that.
But I almost feel like Ty West always had this planned. Like he already had the ideas.
There's a third one.
What's that?
There's a third one too. Yeah. Like he definitely had this planned.
I mean, he even probably sold it to the company as, look, we'll do this one, and then I have these 2 scripts. They're just ready to go, and then we just do quick 3-week shoots, and it's more like with Child's Play 3. It felt like they saw the box office for the weekend of Child's Play 2. They're like, oh, son of a bitch, we didn't expect the second one to be, whatever, and then immediately rush. They didn't have an idea. They were like, they probably went to like available writers and said, what idea do you got? What idea do you got? What do you got? Like that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I guess the smartest idea won, and that's what they had, and that's really depressing. I mean, like, again, it's not worth talking about. It's the same movie, just a different location. Like, you can get away with that with Child's Play 2, but you can't do it 3 times in a row.
I was wrong, by the way. The writer is the same writer from the other movies, Don Mancini, who created it. So, I don't know, maybe he just, you rush it sometimes when a writer is just like exhausted from finishing the one, and all of a sudden like, we want another one, like, son of a bitch. But I think taking that time off and then coming back with Bride of Chucky later. And I think the fact that there's more space, there's usually like 5-6 years, sometimes more, between sequels, and I think that what works best for him.
Yeah, I mean, say what you will about Bride of Chucky. I didn't really care for it, but at least there was like effort put into it.
Yeah, there's an energy, a vibe to it. I fucking love Bride of Chucky, but the Seed of Chucky is the one that kind of loses me a bit.
Oh, maybe I'm thinking it's Seed of Chucky. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, Bride is where he gets married and he's all stitched up, and it's directed by Ronnie Yu. And then the fifth one is Seed of Chucky, where they're trying to have a kid, and that's directed by the writer of it. And it's really campy, and John Waters shows up, and that's
the one I'm thinking.
Yeah, I don't like that one. But then I like the two direct-to-video ones, The Cult and I think, what is it, like the Curse of Chucky? I think those are great sequels.
And then I saw the most recent one, and that one was great.
Have you seen the show at all on Sci-Fi?
No, but I do want to give it a shot.
Yeah, I've been hearing good things about it. But, yeah, Child's Play 2, you're still on the right track. It's not as good as the first one, but it's still entertaining. And anything else you want to say before we go?
No, I think that's about it.
All right, everybody, that is it. Facebook, Twitter, social media, whatever, all your podcast hosts under Hit Rewind, and that's it. Have a good night.
Good night, folks.